Welcome to Xhibition, an Xbox podcast, episode number 47. My name is Samuel Adams, and this is a weekly podcast dedicated entirely to the world of Xbox, bringing you everything you need to know to keep yourself in the loop. So if you enjoy the show, you like what you see, once you hear, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, or add the show to your podcast feed of choice, or heck, do them both, just in case you're out and about and you don't have time to watch the video, the podcast is there. Whatever you need, I would greatly appreciate that support. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's show. I did want to say, for those that are celebrating and listening on Sunday, Happy Easter. If you're listening later, I do hope you had a good Easter if you do celebrate it. But we have a ton of big news to dive into today because Microsoft is going to be bringing ads into free-to-play games, apparently, according to a new report from Business Insider. That seems like a feature that is on the way. Additionally, Halo Infinite maps have a bit more detail to them now, and certain Affinity is getting more involved with a Halo Battle Royale. We'll talk more about that and more on today's show, so without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. Let's start everything off over on VGC today, where Jordan Midler says Microsoft is reportedly exploring integrating ads into free-to-play games. Now, before we all freak out, I want to also say I freaked out a little bit as well when I first saw this headline, but the more I read into it, the more that this has the potential to be something good. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Jordan Midler writes, Microsoft is reportedly exploring integrating advertisements such as billboards or posters for real products in its free-to-play games. As reported by Business Insider, the tech giant is looking to further opportunities for developers to profit. One of the sources speculated Microsoft is not currently interested in collecting a cut of ad revenue because it wants to provide more money-making opportunities to developers who make free-to-play games, writes Business Insider. Microsoft is said to be aware that this may cause a bad reaction in some players, especially due to the stigma free-to-play games currently have regarding microtransactions and ad revenue streams. It's moving cautiously and intends to create a private marketplace where only select brands can insert ads into games in a way that doesn't disrupt the gameplay experience, said two sources to Business Insider. BI claims that sources have told them early plans to integrate these ads include things like digitally rendered billboards in a car racing game. Insider was unable to learn if Xbox will also offer other types of in-game ad units, like avatar skins or video ads that play in gaming lobbies. Insider was also unable to determine if Microsoft has pitched the Xbox offer to advertisers yet. And Jordan Midler does a good job of going on to point out where this strategy has already been in place. We see Barack Obama's ad in Burnout Paradise back in 2008, and on top of that, NBA 2K is also very famous for using this kind of tactic, and in a negative way because they got so much backlash they had to actually change their approach a couple of years ago, but they have ads that kind of cycle throughout the entire season as the year-long lifespan of this game takes its course. So, right off the bat, this has the potential to be absolutely horrendous, and I want to totally call that out from the very beginning. Because if any game, paid or free, is riddled with advertisements and microtransactions and gimme, grab kind of things, if that's a term, it immediately turns me off from continuing to go back into the game. That is the risk that is run here. Now, if done properly, and it sounds like Microsoft is doing this properly, if they choose to do it at all, this can be something that is a great revenue stream for smaller developers and developers who Microsoft specifically chooses for this opportunity. The question is, what developers are going to be offered the chance to have in-game advertisements, and how will they actually be implemented at the end of the day? For me personally, the idea of having posters on walls that advertise Mountain Dew rather than Dew Mountain, if it's some kind of generic brand that's come up with from the game marketing team, or if you have a billboard for a literal car in Forza, that kind of thing doesn't bother me, but it does need to be a free-to-play game. I think that is what has to be driven home here, no pun intended. But the billboards, the posters, that kind of thing doesn't bother me. The question for me is what happens if this is successful and then it continues to spiral. I think that there has to be a very tight grip kept on this kind of concept, because while it would be humorous to have a free-to-play Call of Duty game like Warzone introduce Call of Duty Mountain Dew crossover skins or Call of Duty Doritos crossover skins. That stuff is funny, but at the same time, I don't know. It kind of feels gross to me. It kind of feels like I'm playing games in this capitalistic, gross society. That's just my personal take, though. I think that a ton of people might actually be down for that. I mean, we live in a world where Snoop Dogg is a Call of Duty operator, so anything is possible. But I love the cautious approach here, and I like that Microsoft is being very meticulous, because even me reading this headline, I immediately had a negative reaction, and I'm a huge Xbox fan. I mean, we have this podcast here, that goes to speak for itself. And so with me being as into the Xbox ecosystem as I am and seeing this and having concerns, I know that people that are completely outside of the conversation are probably going to have concerns as well. So for me, I'm not against the idea, but it does need to be handled very carefully. And I like the idea of smaller developers being able to fund their next project or fund the future development of a free-to-play game through new ad opportunities that Microsoft provides. Again, assuming they don't impact the gameplay experience, assuming they don't have any kind of impact on the brand itself, I don't really see any kind of issue with introducing this kind of idea into the game. So keep moving cautiously, and of course, stay tuned in here to Xhibition, because we will continue to report on this story as updates come, if updates do in fact come. But very interesting report this week, and of course, as always, I would love to hear what you think. Hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on YouTube, the links are down below. Let me know what you think about Microsoft potentially integrating some ads into free-to-play games, or at least offering the opportunity to do so. Next up on the roster over at VG247, we have Stephanie Nunnally writing that The Witcher 3 next-gen development has shifted to in-house and has been postponed until further notice. Now, this coincides with another report that Cyberpunk 2077's DLC is coming in 2023, and actually the majority of the studio is currently at work on Cyberpunk. So, very interesting report there, kind of tangential. I'm not going to be going deeply into the Cyberpunk story because it's more so just a mention that has now been pushed into next year, which in my opinion is a bit too far for interest. I personally rebought the game, Cyberpunk, whenever it dropped on Xbox Series X and S, but I probably played 3 hours of it and lost interest, and I'm never going back. I can tell you that right now, just not my cup of tea. But The Witcher 3 is a fan-favorite game. It's one of those games of the generation when we look back at the PS4 and Xbox One. And so this one has a lot more fanfare behind it. So, Stephanie writes, over at VG247, according to the company, it has decided to have its in-house development team conduct the remaining work. Because of this, it is currently evaluating the scope of work to be done, so it is postponing the Q2 release until further notice. Last year, the company said the game was being developed by its external team, mainly, which is Saber Interactive. That is the company that it has worked with before on the Switch port and also with updates in the past. Announced during WitcherCon, the Witcher 3 next-gen update for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S will be released as a complete edition and comes with some new items inspired by the Witcher Netflix series. Of course, those who own the game on PS4 and Xbox One will be able to download the upgrade for the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S versions at no cost, and the extra content will also be made available for all platforms. So, this is interesting, and I was listening to the Kinda Funny Games Daily podcast earlier this week, and they said that the developer behind this, Saber Interactive, is in Russia, so that's probably causing some issues. I have not verified that for myself, but something to consider. And of course, international turmoil right now, very difficult as you can imagine here. But for me personally, this is not that big of a deal, just because The Witcher 3, and a pretty good version of it, I mean, we have, enhancements on the Xbox One X already, is out there in the wild. There's nothing wrong with this version of the game as is. It runs very well, etc., etc., and it will look even better when the Series X and S version drops. But if you were planning to play The Witcher 3, and this was one of your expected experiences this year, it looks like it's going to be coming later in the year than you probably expected. And if I had to guess, it doesn't sound out of the realm of reason to get this pushed to 2023. I'm curious as to how much of a priority this actually is. And there was this big graph that was released earlier this week when it comes to the prioritization of the team at CD Projekt, which looks like Cyberpunk is certainly the priority as far as how many bodies are allocated to working on a project. But in terms of scale and scope, I would assume that a DLC for Cyberpunk is much larger than a port for The Witcher 3, which is already looking pretty good as it is today. So, this game is something that a ton of people are looking forward to. It's still going to come out sooner rather than later, but now it has been moved in-house, and probably for the better, because I feel like this team, specifically now that they have had the issues with Cyberpunk, are probably going to be looking at this game with a bit more scrutiny, because The Witcher is an IP that has a specific amount of luxury to it at this point. It has a specific reputation that should not be thrown to the wayside. I think this is a really good kind of peace offering to the Cyberpunk and to the CD Projekt fans to be able to say, hey, sorry about that last one. Here's a really, really good port of The Witcher 3. That's kind of the way this needs to go. And I would hope that they take this very seriously. I would hope that this version of the game is going to be the penultimate version, but only time will tell. We thought that Cyberpunk was going to be great, and they still have not earned my trust back because Cyberpunk is still kind of janky. Just is what it is. But we will just have to wait and see on this one, and you won't be seeing it in Q2 of 2022. It's that time of the week once again, my friends. Let's chat about Halo Infinite, because Certain Affinity tweeted earlier this week saying, "We've been part of the Halo franchise for more than 15 years, and we are honored to say we are deepening our relationship with 343 and have been entrusted with further evolving Halo Infinite in some new and exciting ways. Join us on our journey, and if you are someone with the skills to pay the bills, you can dive over to bit.ly/careersca and sign up to work on Halo Infinite with Certain Affinity." But of course, if you don't know, they've been designing maps, they've been partnering with 343 for a good long while now. And so they've played a very big part in making not only elements within Halo Infinite, but also elements within all of 343's projects. And so this is something that a lot of people have been speculating on throughout the week, saying, hey, what's going on here? Are we getting more maps? Are they partnering with 343 to increase the frequency of content? What's going on here? And so over on Reddit, with r/gaming leaks and rumors, Corden gives details on Certain Affinity's Halo Infinite game mode on the latest episode of Xbox 2, which is up right now on YouTube. He says it is a Battle Royale. It's been in development for over 2 years. It's a huge deal, and he considers it a Warzone/separate game undertaking. The goal is to bring in new players into the Halo franchise, and it's going to be targeting that Fortnite, Warzone, Apex audience that's just looking for that Battle Royale action. And the assumed target release is Season 3 or Season 4. There's also some ties into the Forge mode that is on the way, and on top of that, they did bring in Certain Affinity for this specific mode, saying, quote, "Don't think they're going to ignore the rest of the game." So, if you do want to check out the direct quotes and conversation between Randall Thor and Corden over on the Xbox 2 podcast, you absolutely should check that out. But going back to Certain Affinity and the idea of a a Halo Battle Royale, this is something that I have been saying for years needs to happen. And whenever I first said it, immediately everybody said, oh, no, we don't need a Battle Royale in Halo. That's not what Halo's about. And I was like, okay, sure, but it's probably going to happen at some point. You can go back. That video's still up and ready to watch. At the end of the day, while it's not something you might want to personally play, the idea of having a Halo Battle Royale, those three words together, on the Microsoft Store that is free to play and ready for download, that sentence in and of itself, that's going to bring in more players. And right now, you see Halo Infinite struggling with that traditional offering. Now, admittedly, some of this struggle is due in part to how long it has taken to release new content, and the lack of content in the original release of the game last year. But at the same time, you still have arena, you still have big team battle, and that's gotten a good chunk of the community to stick around, but not for the long haul. I am still playing Halo Infinite, but I have noticed when it's not a peak time, it's getting harder to find a match, and that's a problem. So being able to evolve Halo and make it something that is a go-to game for the next generation of people, building an affinity for Halo as a franchise within younger people that are playing games now that aren't in their late 20s and 30s and that are instead in their teens and early 20s. Or, even going further, you have people that were playing Halo in their 20s that are now 40. You've got to evolve past the traditional offering. And so I think this is something that is going to potentially help make that happen. Now, it has to be done very carefully. It needs to be able to be played solo, duos, squads, whatever you want, but it still has to be Halo. I think that's really what it comes down to. It has to be Halo. And I think it can be done. I think they have the open world sandbox already to make it happen. I don't think that's beyond the realm of reason to expect that they just repurpose sections or the entirety of the original single player map and just make it happen. But I still have concerns just because this is something that's new. It's nerve-wracking to introduce something new into the Halo universe. So for me personally, after looking back on Halo Infinite as an experience over the course of the past 6 months, it's something that has kept my attention, although I did dip off there for a while. I have come back to the game now, and it's something that I look forward to the future of. But I still have concerns. I love the transparency from the team. I even like the fact that Certain Affinity is letting us know they're deepening their relationship with 343 and building something new and exciting. And I think that Jez Corden kind of confirms this is going to be a Battle Royale, but it has to be done properly. 343 dropped the ball on Halo 5. Halo 4 was all right. I know that tons of people were not a fan of Halo 4, but Halo 4 was all right. Halo 5 was a ball drop. Halo Infinite, not that good. Not as good as it could have been, I should say. Pretty solid game, great mechanics overall, but it could be better. And I think they are working actively to make that happen. And so to see this partnership with Certain Affinity deepen, to see 343 continue to invest, and to see Microsoft continue backing the Halo brand, I feel confident in the future, and I'm looking forward to playing this game throughout the rest of the year. Speaking of which, if you're looking forward to playing it, there are more maps coming, starting with Season 2, which drops on May the 3rd. And if you do want to check it out for yourself, there's a fantastic video that gives you a look at both of the new maps that are coming. You can see it reported on here from Pure Xbox. This is the kind of marketing content that I want to see personally. And so if you don't have a chance to go check out this for yourself, there aren't any quick cuts to Spartans killing each other. There is no activity in terms of gameplay on these actual maps. This just gives you long, in-depth, drawn-out shots of what you are going to be seeing when you dive in on May the 3rd to these two new maps. Again, one coming to Arena, one coming to BTB. You have Catalyst, and you have the other one. I forget the name of the other one. Catalyst and Breaker. Catalyst is the Arena, Breaker is the BTB map. These look phenomenal. I want more of this. I think that's really what it comes down to. I want more of this sooner. And I know that's a lot to ask in today's day and age, but 2 maps after 6 months of waiting, I've said it before, I'll say it again, mention it here, is not enough content when it comes down to the nitty gritty of it. And so I hope that this partnership with Certain Affinity not only brings a Battle Royale, but also new conversations into the mix, new ideas into the mix that might have been limited before. That's personally what I want to see, because I want this game to deliver more of this. These maps look very good, and I could not be more excited about diving in on May 3rd. And I think that seasons 3 and 4 are really going to be where you see this game hit its stride. And there is a vocal portion of the community that is talking about how this game has failed, dead game, I don't want to go back to it. That's all fine. You don't have to. But I would bet my bottom dollar that as soon as legitimately good content in a large abundance comes to this game, or whenever there is a time, whenever original players that jumped in on day one can look back and say, oh, there are 10 new maps and 15 new modes or something wild like that, I want to go back. I'm ready to dive back in. They will come back. Because Halo Infinite, at its core, is a great game. It feels good, plays well, and keeps that Halo nature at its heart. And I think that's really something that 343 has nailed when it comes to this game. It just needs more content. And so they're starting to deliver on that. And I think that this partnership with Certain Affinity is certainly going to make that happen. And you can see here, the perfect GIF of choice replied to by Insipid Ghost, my friend Luke Lore, over on the Xbox expansion pass. But there's certainly a camaraderie between Halo and Certain Affinity. So looking forward to seeing the fruits of those shared labors. Speaking of Halo, you might be aware of a little collection called the Master Chief Collection. I know it's been a while, Halo Infinite came out, it's pretty much all we've been talking about, but the Master Chief Collection kind of, for me, carried the beginning of this generation. And for a lot of people, it's where they got started with the world of Xbox. Those original Halo experiences are all bundled together, ready and waiting for you, and there is now a new experience to enjoy with this new blog post on HaloWaypoint.com, an update on Halo MCC from 343 Industries. We've got some unfinished business. Last year, we announced that Halo the Master Chief Collection would move away from seasonal updates following the release of Season 8 Mythic, but by no means were we done with this legacy project. The publishing team at 343 Industries is dedicated to helping build and maintain the MCC, and over the last few years, they have worked tirelessly to help fix pesky bugs, release new legacy-focused updates, bring the collection to PC, and deliver all new content alongside fan-requested features. With many of those goals accomplished, we have set to work on maintaining and wrapping up some of the plans we didn't quite finish last year, so let's dive right into the future of the MCC in 2022. First and foremost, ODST Firefight, which is FloodFight. It is effectively Firefight with Flood. That's pretty much all you need to know. Very exciting new mode here. It's out now, right now. You can dive into it and enjoy. Pretty cool playlist ready and waiting for you. And there's a screenshot. You've got flood forms coming at you from every angle. And of course, it does get to be a bit more intense as those rounds go on. But on top of that, there have been some UI improvements. There is going to be CGB full title support and quick match flow, which is custom game browser. They have added support for automatic team changing, which allows game hosts to avoid manual team changes in favor of automatically evening the teams out when a new match begins, which is super, super cool. Some new Forge and mod tools are ready and waiting for that community. But the big addition here is campaign crossplay for Halo 3 and ODST, which now means that all of the campaigns for every Halo game can now be played with your friends no matter where you're playing. That is super cool. So if you have a PC and you want to partner up with your friends on Xbox, you absolutely can, and you can play through every one of the games in the Master Chief Collection. That is fantastic. Now, on top of that, we also see campaign customization coming for Halo 4. Weapon customizations allows for players to use their skins when starting levels and when picking up weapons. Super cool there. And of course, you have some medal updates and more to discuss. But certainly some awesome changes to see, and I love the fact that they are continuing to support the Master Chief Collection, even though Infinite is out in the wild. And I feel like it's worth looking back and thinking about where the Master Chief Collection started and comparing it to where it is today. They very well could have abandoned that game and just said, hey, it is what it is. The matchmaking doesn't really work that well. Sorry, the campaign kind of sucks in terms of how you play it. Not very well balanced, not very well thought out, just kind of leaving it out there. That's not what they chose to do. They chose to go back. They chose to make sure that everything worked properly. They chose to make sure that the Master Chief Collection was the proper representation of the quality that the Halo franchise delivered throughout the original Xbox and Xbox 360 eras, and they delivered on that here. For me, going forward, what I would also like to see in a future update that I do not believe they mentioned here is to include Halo 5 Guardians in the launcher. Go ahead, wrap it on in there. And I know that it's kind of weird. They try to pretend like Halo 5 Guardians never really happened, but it's still a part of the Halo history. And I think to leave it out of the Master Chief Collection feels strange, especially whenever this is a group of games that has been ported to the Xbox Series X and S. I think the same should probably be done for Halo 5 just for consistency's sake. And so that game is not left behind for those that do want to play it. Now, of course, totally backwards compatible, available in Game Pass, not a big deal, but that's just me nitpicking. I would love to see all of these games brought together. But for the hardcore old school Halo fans out there, FloodFight is out now. Dive in, give it a shot, and on top of that, super much so looking forward to the rest of 2022 and seeing what they have in store in terms of when these new updates drop and what else they could have up their sleeves even further down the road if anything else is to come. So stay tuned. Speaking of the original Halo games, 343 was not originally the Halo team. That was Bungie, and now Bungie is focused entirely on Destiny and of course future projects. They have now been acquired by the team at PlayStation, so they are a member of the PlayStation Studios family, but their future games will continue coming to Xbox. So with that being said, it's very important to note they are going digital first and they are going fully remote, embracing remote work all the way, saying that it is entirely here to stay. They say, quote, "The transition to work from home was not easy, but the results speak for themselves." This comes from GameDeveloper.com, which writes, "Destiny developer Bungie is going digital first to enable remote working across its studios." The company explained that most current and future roles in states including Washington, California, Oregon, Illinois, Florida, North Carolina, and Texas will be fully remote eligible moving forward. The studio, which is being acquired by PlayStation maker Sony for $3.6 billion, added that more states will be approved for remote work soon. Bungie chief exec Pete Parsons writes, "Over the past 2 years, we have redefined how we work at Bungie. The transition to work from home was not easy, but the results speak for themselves. Today, it's clear that a digital-first workplace is not the future of work. It's already here, and we are all in," end quote. So, this is still something that's kind of rolling out, but I bring this up to say that it's possible to make this happen. And I think that's something that the last few years has proven. But remote work is important in so many ways to allow accessibility for everybody to be able to have a fair shake at getting the job, no matter of their location, their ability level, whatever it might be. If you have the skills, you can join the team. That's something that's super, super important. But at the same time, the studio has to have the structure to make it happen. And I'm talking about project management structure. I'm talking about infrastructure, like actually shipping people the items they need to work properly. To be able to build your studio around the idea of being digital first is something that is the first big step towards creating successful projects. As somebody who has worked for 2 companies now that have been partially remote some of the time, it's important to align your team and make that a priority. Because if digital is not a priority and you are still expected to come into the office, those that are digital are going to feel a little bit less as a part of the team as compared to those that are in the office, but there has to be a shared camaraderie around the project. It's something that's very difficult to handle, but you also have the threat of it impacting the overall quality of the project. We've seen that throughout the past 2 years, where many, many games have been pushed. Some have come out and they're just not as good as we had hoped they would be. Battlefield 2042 as a perfect example. There are multiple issues wrong with that game, but remote work was likely one of them during the pandemic. And so to be able to have a proper structure set up that is ready to support this transition, I think is something that is worth applauding. And I'm excited to see what Bungie has been working on. My big question is, how will other big developers follow suit? Because Bungie, although their last expansion had a rough launch in Destiny, I think it was the Raid that had a rough launch, actually. You can correct me in the chat or in the comment section down below if I'm wrong. But if Bungie can deliver on the quality that Destiny 2 has brought in its latest expansion by working remotely, then other developers can as well. And so I'm excited to learn more about how they have evolved. Hopefully there is a lot of transparency into how they're working. I would love to see more about that. But certainly exciting here, especially for those that might be in more remote locations. I mean, imagine living in a small town in Oklahoma or something and being able to work for Bungie. And you don't have to move to California. You don't have to move to Texas. And again, I haven't seen all of the paperwork here, but if it's entirely remote first, that's something that is super, super cool. So congrats to them for making that jump, and I'm excited to read more in the future. To round out today's show, we are going to be talking about two big game announcements that I was very excited about earlier this week. The first of which is that No More Heroes 3 is breaking that Nintendo exclusivity and jumping over to PC, PlayStation, and Xbox in fall of 2022. This news came from publisher Xseed Games over on Twitter that writes, quote, "Our favorite otaku assassin returns. Travis Touchdown has been forced out of retirement to defend not only Santa Destroy, but Earth itself. Bring on the Beam Katana and take on Travis's toughest challenge yet in No More Heroes 3, coming this fall to PS4, PS5, Xbox, and PC." Very cool here, and as somebody who owns a Nintendo Switch, 9 times out of 10, if it's a third-party game, I'm going to want to play it on my more powerful hardware. And so to be able to dive into this on my Xbox, I think is going to be super cool. I've never played a No More Heroes game, so this is likely one that I am going to be picking up on day one. So I'm excited about this. Now at The Verge, they write, while the Switch version played great during combat sequences, the sections where you're in the open world ran terribly, so hopefully that runs a little bit better on not only the latest hardware, but also the more powerful last generation hardware as well. On top of that though, Bugsnax is making its way to Xbox, and not only is it making its way to Xbox with the new Bugsnax update, it's also dropping on Game Pass on April the 28th. If you're not familiar, Bugsnax is a first-person adventure game where you collect kind of bug, kind of snack creatures and feed them to your friends. You play as a journalist following the trail of lost explorer Elizabeth Megafig to Snacktooth Island, where she discovered Bugsnax before mysteriously disappearing. The only way to track her down is to catch tons of Bugsnax and feed them to Lizbert's scattered band of misfit grumpsisses. However, anybody who consumes a Bugsnax rapidly mutates into what they have eaten. So here you can see it coming to Xbox One, Series X and S, Cloud Gaming, and Windows 10 PCs on April the 28th. There's also the free content update called the Isle of Big Snacks with a couple of new trophies on PlayStation, but of course a couple of extra achievements in the world of Xbox. This is certainly not going to be for everyone, but it was a successful indie that launched on PlayStation, now jumping over, breaking the mold, and coming to Xbox and Nintendo Switch as well, if you were interested in diving in. So again, two exciting game announcements for me. It's awesome to see these third parties embracing Xbox and getting on the platform. So very excited to dive into Bugsnax, give it a shot, see what all the hubbub is about. But in general, just loving the energy around Xbox right now. Seems a lot of people are getting on board with the brand. But that wraps up this week's episode of Xhibition, an Xbox podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, drop me a like down below. And of course, if you are new here and you enjoy what you saw, what you heard today, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, follow over on a podcast platform of your choice, and get the show delivered directly to you each and every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. But until next time, you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. I'll talk to you soon, and keep on playing.